Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and hodl on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Thursday. We missed Monday. That's entirely my fault. I was out of town working on my grandparents' farm. They had some trees that died, and so I went with my dad to help cut that down. And so we missed Monday's episode, but we are back and excited to just kind of I think just kind of have a conversation about thoughts that are on our mind. So,
True.
what's going on?
That's true. I will say it was not entirely your fault that we missed on Monday. I'm going to say this. Number one, we are held by no law. And so sometimes we skip episodes and it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. You're fine. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Right? I also had stuff going on Monday. I was prepping for a wedding. My nephew got married at my house on Tuesday morning. So I spent Monday prepping it was outside. So the yard and the deck and all the things and power washing things I would never think to power wash unless someone was getting married in my backyard.
I bet your backyard looks great, though.
It is pristine right now. You wouldn't even believe it. We should have another party or something just so that people can witness. Okay, so let's start with some market updates as always. Bitcoin is up about 1.7% in 24 hours, almost 7% in 7 days. It's sitting pretty at 24,450. ETH is up 3.2% in 24 hours and 17.3% in 7 days. At about 1900 is where it's sitting. This is also coming on news of the consumer price index kind of easing up a bit. And also, I saw a little blurb of an article yesterday that they're in the final home stretch of the merge. Those are quote fingers, the merge happening with ETH in this step of the moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So our biggest mover today is Ethereum Classic. Again, not a surprise. It's the number 19 coin. It's up 10.3% in 24 hours, 19% over 7 days, which is kind of, 17.3 for regular ETH, Ethereum Classic 19%. They're pretty neck and neck with that. So Ethereum Classic is sitting at $43.18. And if you remember, Ethereum Classic is also the kind of, when Ethereum broke off, they went Ethereum Classic and then Ethereum broke off and went and did their own thing. So that's who Ethereum Classic is. We've talked about them many, many times. And yeah, that's our market updates. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about, well, you could call it conspiracy theory. It's just more like, here are the things we've been pondering, and is this possibly happening? Again, we talk about looking at patterns, and if you look at some patterns, you might be led to think some of these things too.
I want to start out and say we're not financial advisors. None of this is financial advice. These are just our thoughts. They're not even concrete thoughts. They're probably going to change. We're just discussing what's on the top of our mind. You shouldn't make any decisions based off of the information we get. You should do everything in prayer. And yeah, so I just want to lead that off because some of the things we're talking about are strange and weird, and none of it are we saying is 100% true. It's just kind of, hey, this is what we're thinking about. These are possibilities and things that we're considering.
Yeah, a good disclaimer. I'm glad you put that out there. These really are just things we've been thinking about, just things we're pondering. And we've talked about this before. You know, the Hebrew word that I don't remember or can pronounce. I couldn't
Yeah.
pronounce it to begin with. About talking through things and even healthy debating for the sake of growth.
Yeah.
Consider this something kind of like this, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about these things. Is it happening? Is it not happening? I don't know. Those kinds of things.
Exactly. All right. Well, first, I'm gonna go over a couple things that actually are happening. It's it's real. It's in the news. Um, but BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, has partnered with Coinbase to help bring in institutional clients. And so I don't know exactly what that will look like, but I know that, BlackRock oversees roughly $10 trillion in assets, and they're going to be working with Coinbase to help get these larger companies and people into crypto in some way. And so if you're just trading crypto, that is exciting news because more money, more big money pouring into crypto is probably only going to help push it forward. So that is generally, I think, a positive thing, especially for the long term health. If you have the biggest asset manager in the world saying, "Hey, look, we see value in crypto. We want a way to provide crypto for our clients," that's probably, that means that it's probably going to be around for a minute. So I think that's a generally a good thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about is we've brought up Michael Saylor before. He was the CEO of
MicroStrategy.
MicroStrategy, and they have had I can't remember exactly how much Bitcoin they have, but he's very outspoken on his love for Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin maximalist. The company has invested in it. He's personally invested in it. Well, it was just recently in the news that he is stepping down as CEO of MicroStrategies in order to focus more on Bitcoin.
Huh.
That's the in quotes, focus more on Bitcoin. And so now instead of the CEO, I don't know exactly, and he'll still be involved with MicroStrategy. He just won't have that leadership role. Their new CEO has added, if we have excess cash, we will put it into Bitcoin and we will hold it. And so I think it's really interesting to see, a prominent business person say, "Hey, look, I'm shifting my focus from technology as we've known it to what I believe in will come," and his firm not reversing his decisions but holding to that. That's pretty interesting as well.
Hmm.
Um, and then another just quick one, Bank of America has been doing internal looking into crypto, and they are starting to see value. And so it's it seems like maybe some of these larger banks, I know we've talked about another one not too long ago, I can't remember the name of it, but it seems like a couple larger banks are now looking at crypto in a real possible way. And I think it's exciting to see crypto gaining more legitimacy in the mainstream thing. Like it's kind of been this grassroots, random people involved in it, and now it is looking like it's gaining some speed. So those are good things.
Absolutely. So when unfortunately we've had this conversation, we were like, we should have just been recording this the whole time. When Josh was talking about Coinbase partnering up with BlackRock, I will say all of the red flags and warning bells went off in my brain. Like this happens sometimes, right? Like you may not know something about everything, but there's something internally that goes, oh, I don't know that this is a good idea, right?
Right.
Some might call it discernment, some might call it intuition. It might be a little of both. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, but honestly, so this is what I've been thinking, and I'm gonna get into the weird stuff now. So we've always been talking about looking for patterns, right? As traders, this is what you do anyways. You look for patterns in the market and then you trade accordingly. Um, but I also have mentioned a few times that even with a lot of the breaches and I don't want to say failings, but like some of the shortcomings that have been highlighted lately with some of the different coins or tokens or companies involved in crypto lately have all seemed to have something that is a little familiar. Like there's been kind of a pattern, like a waveform that's happened with timing of it, with the amounts with which companies, with the kind of technology they have, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And I have to say this. I read something. I have no proof of it. I don't think there's any proof of it out there anywhere, but something about it rang a little true. Um, I'm not saying it is truth, by the way. Check yourself, do your own research, right? But there were rumors that BlackRock had a hand in the entire crash and failing of Terra and Luna. And BlackRock is a very large company. And I mean, their GDP alone, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is large enough that they could shift things. But I've been thinking in the last couple months with this crypto winter and with all of these breaches and hacks that have been happening, it's just like clockwork. They've just been happening one after the other. And even we talked a week ago, here are all these breaches, here are all these hacks. And even just recently, they've been making big news, but they've not been for giant dollar amounts. Like $1.3 million in a pool that is $1.2 trillion is not actually percentage wise a huge amount of money. And people are still able to get some things recovered in some of these instances. But it just makes me think, what's behind this? Like, what is causing this? Is it really just a bunch of rogue loner hackers out there who are going, oh, I'm going to try to hack this? Or is there something a bit more organized about it? And why is it happening so regularly? It's like every 3 days you hear about a new one, right?
Mhm.
And so I have to wonder, especially with the other side of the news coming around, all of the governments, especially US government, I will say, who they're like chomping at the bit to regulate crypto, but they don't have a handle on it yet. And it seems like there's this case being built that crypto is unstable, that people don't know how to manage their money on their own. It's dangerous. The government needs to save you. Like there's kind of this narrative that's being built a little bit around this. Um, and so it just makes me wonder. I've wondered, does the government just have something like a group of hackers and they're hacking these things, making little breaches, and then releasing it out so that everybody knows about it? But then Josh is talking about Coinbase and BlackRock combining forces. And then I have to wonder, is it BlackRock doing it? Like, would the government actually get their hand in it, or would they maybe nudge somebody to do it as well? I don't know. But these are the things I've been pondering because it just seems a bit I don't know. There's something about it that seems suspicious. And that's
Mm.
all I'm going to say. But that's where my brain has been with it. And I just have been questioning things like, why is this happening now? Why does it seem to have a rhythm? Those kinds of things.
I think what you're noticing is the narrative that's being given about crypto is generally negative. It's, hey, look at these hacks, look at these crypto winters, these crashes. Look at all the opportunity to lose money. But if you look in the normal financial world, people's credit cards get hacked all the time, probably daily. I know personally, I've had, I think, 3 instances where I've had to get new credit cards because of where unauthorized transactions were happening with it. Um, things like that happen all the time, but it's not that isn't the narrative that we're given about the normal financial market. We're told, hey, this is safe, this is good to use. And so, it's really probably dollar wise, more money is lost in the traditional financial world. And yes, there's more money to be lost there. Um, but I think the narrative that's being given is generally painted as a negative narrative when maybe it doesn't quite warrant that. I think
Mm,
it's new. I think it's scary. I think it's uncomfortable for some people. They don't understand it. And so they're looking for reasons for it to not work. And so that's what they're focusing on rather than like, hey, look at the system we have that also is not working maybe the way it should. And maybe this is a step to help fix some of those issues. Maybe it's not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say crypto's perfect,
right.
but maybe it's a step in the right direction.
Hmm. That crypto's a step in the right direction, or the
I think crypto is a step to fix some of the things that the normal financial system is missing, but I think the people writing the narrative don't see that or don't want to see that. And so they're only writing from the negative aspects.
I could I could agree with that. I could get on board with that
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah. So do you think it's possible that some of these things like BlackRock stepping in and getting involved in crypto in such a public way could result in any kind of manipulation of the markets?
I think there already is manipulation in the markets, and I think that the larger firms that the people who have more money who get involved, I mean, they're not getting involved to lose money. And
Mm,
so, I think they're going to do anything in their power to change that. So there's a couple things. I know one of them we've talked about before, but I have um, a friend of a friend of a friend who was a former commodities trader in the normal stock market, and they saw extreme manipulation in the markets that they were in to the point where they would get up in the morning and sort of decide, hey, this is what the price of soybeans is going to be today. And then they would trade accordingly. And that, so they ended up leaving that market because they were like, wow, like this is marketed to people to be a fair system, a just system where everyone has an equal opportunity, but really that's not true. We're just shifting money from one pocket to the other pocket based on what we want to do that day. And so, I think and there's more stories like that with the normal market where it's like, hey, when you really dig down into it, it's not as fair as it may seem to be.
mm, yeah.
Um, and I think that exists within the crypto world as well. I know that we talked several months ago about how there was some research done, and I think it was over 80% of people who had ever bought in Bitcoin had not sold their Bitcoin, which meant that it was a very small portion of the crypto market that actually was influencing the price. because
True.
the price only changes based on how people trade. And so if everyone bought it and didn't sell it, the price isn't going to fluctuate because the value is what they thought the value was. The value changes based on people buying and selling, supply and demand. And so there's there already is pretty significant evidence that the crypto market is heavily influenced by a small number of people. And then you get people like BlackRock getting involved in it who who are the world's largest asset manager, and it's like, "Oh, how are they there's no way that they don't get involved that doesn't influence the market because they're just that large." It's like when Elon does things, like, you can call that influencing or manipulating the market because he's such a large investor that what he does will have an impact, even just his own moves. But then when he, shares with his millions of followers what he's thinking about doing, they also respond accordingly. And so, whether you think it's helpful or hurtful, people do have an influence in the market one way or another.
Right. When we're talking about BlackRock, though, I mean, what is the scope of their size? What is the scope of the influence that they could potentially have?
I mean, pretty significant. I know you mentioned earlier we were going to go over some of their GDP. So they 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 currently have over somewhere around $11 trillion in assets under management. 11 trillion. So if we look at the top GDPs of the world, the United States is number 1 at basically 21 trillion. China is number 2 at just under 15 million, and then you have
Trillion.
Japan at 5. And
5
so
trillion.
5 trillion. And so you have BlackRock sitting basically with the wealth of the third largest country in the world. There's it's impossible to say that they don't have a global influence in markets. That's just there's no other way to look at it. Like, if you have the third largest wealth in terms of countries, that's you are changing things no matter what you do.
It's interesting. So if we go back to these ponderings, right, of like what kind of influence do they have? Could they have? We were just looking into, just looking into BlackRock, period. Like surface level. Okay. There's no digging deep. This is like, okay, who's the CEO? The CEO
Mhm.
is Larry Fink. Why do we know that name? So let's Google Larry Fink. Um, and in doing that, what was it? He was connected. He was called upon by the US government after the 2008 financial crisis,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And what was his role there?
I don't know the exact role, but I do know that um, BlackRock was used to help facilitate the recovery of the 2008 crisis, which is um, probably not super unusual for large companies like that to be contracted by the government. But when you start looking into it, I think the thing that people thought was odd was he the CEO, Larry Fink, had a deep connection with government officials, and many of the leadership of BlackRock had come from like executive branch government positions. And so it was some you see this a lot with a lot in a lot of different industries, but it's always a little bit uncomfortable when you see people who are working on creating legislation that governs an industry than leaving that position of government to go work in that industry.
Mhm.
It that always raises questions like, what were they really fair in what they did, or was it for self-benefit? Um, and I don't want to like push blame on anyone, because if you're in a position where someone's like, "Hey, if you do this for me, you'll be set for life," like, yeah, there's definitely motivation to do that. Um, but it is it is a truth in almost every area of industry. If you really look into it, that happens a lot. But it's when you are someone the size of BlackRock, that's a kind of a thing to look at. Like, hey, how are these people really operating with the same set of rules and opportunity that everyone else is operating with, which is supposed to be the way. I mean, we're supposed to have a fair market. Like, there's not supposed to be monopoly, there's not supposed to be corruption or coercion. I mean, all those things are illegal, but at times it seems that people are skating around the edge of that just as close as they possibly can.
I could see that. I mean, there's even been I feel like it came and went very quickly, but there's the whole issue of in the US government, the people in the legislative branch who are writing laws to regulate some of these markets or even bringing charges against certain companies will know about this and are able to trade their own personal money according to those decisions before they're released. And which sounds like it would be insider trading for the rest of us,
Right.
anyone who's not in that position. But for some reason, it's okay there. But then I mean, if there's a hole in the system there, you have to wonder what other holes are there that we don't actually know about. Because I didn't know about that until a few months ago. And I thought, well, what the hell? Like Martha Stewart went to prison for insider trading with her own company. Um, and it was not at the scope in which this is happening with other people. And it's known and accepted and okay. And I just don't understand how they don't want others to cross the line, but if you're in a certain position, then you can cross that line and it's fine.
Yeah.
Wires are getting crossed and they don't make sense. Things don't add
Mhm.
up. Things don't seem
Yeah.
right.
If you're a government official, the financial moves you make are recorded, um, for these purposes to see what's happening. And there's a fairly prominent congresswoman who multiple times has been accused of insider trading because projects that she is working on, her husband's trading account will make moves in millions of dollars of moves, shortly before something she does goes into effect or is public knowledge, which that's kind of the definition of insider trading.
Right.
And so it's it's one step removed from her, which I think is sort of how they have handled it so far. But it's like it just kind of like, I mean, you don't have to look very hard on the internet to find many examples where with this particular person and their husband's account where it's like, hey, this seems odd.
Hmm. I suppose for me, it just brings into question the integrity
Mm,
of the system, which then brings the whole system into
yeah,
question, at least in my mind. Like, if
right.
you're willing to bypass the rules or the laws on this part, what would make me think that you're not willing to do it on any other part as well?
Right. I think this is one of the hopes of crypto with sort of the open ledger that exists with blockchain, where even if corruption happens, it might be easier to see where it happened and who was involved with it. And it's sort of just that, um, we talked once about the concept of how decentralization, where things are spread across hundreds or thousands of people, actually brings a form of centralization because it's a democracy where it's governed by the people,
Hmm.
not one entity. And I think that's the hope of crypto, is that some of these shady things that have gone on will will be brought to light. That's what transparency brings. And I could probably argue either way on whether or not I want my financial transactions to be totally public or not.
Right.
But there is something about that is, it's open, it's transparent, it's honest, it's, this is what I'm doing. And if you really care to see, you can see.
Hmm.
And
Maybe this is why, like, so many believers, people who follow Yeshua, who follow Christ, who follow Yahweh, have kind of been led in this direction. It makes me wonder if it's because there really is a draw to the transparency, to things being open and in the light and not shrouded in darkness,
yeah,
right? Being hidden away. Um, and I'm with you, Josh. Like, I don't know that in my soul, like in my mind, if I really do want everything in my finances in the light for anyone to see, but I also don't have anything to hide. So what does it really matter? It then that goes into my own personal issue of pride and
yeah.
self and stuff,
The
you
way
know?
I the way I look at it is, I know that there already are people who know every transaction I make. It's been proven before that if you walk into a big box retail store, that your phone starts tracking where you're going inside of that store so that retailers know how to market to you. Anytime you make an
What?
online purchase, it's recorded so that people know how to market to you. I mean, like, these things already happen within the world. It's not open. It isn't transparent. It's a select few who have access to that information.
Who've not
So,
even like been given, like, you don't approve when you walk into the big box store, which
right.
whatever, whichever one of choice. You don't like click the button on your phone to go, yeah, share location, share information,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I mean, yeah, it's true. You don't do that. And so I mean, we've all probably had experiences where one day we're talking about, like, what is the best sofa to buy, and the next day our social media is filled with different sofa advertisements. I mean, so there already is, people are already paying attention to, where do I place my value? What am I interested in? What
Mhm.
we're talking about is just a step that would say, hey, now instead of you getting this through veiled information, it's it's public. It's the information's already being collected, but now we can all see it. And I think if everyone is playing by that set of rules, that offers something that the current system doesn't.
I agree. I agree. I think that is one of the big draws of crypto, or at least blockchain. Like, it
Mm.
just is, there's an element of light to it. That's it. Like, there
Yeah.
just is. And it's somewhat freeing. But I suppose if you're someone who doesn't want your information out there, it might be a bit, you might feel like you need to stay away from it. But then makes you wonder, like, you have to ask the question, would you rather it be traded in secret, or would you rather it be, I mean, in secret, like without you knowing, or
Mm.
would you rather you know and just know that it's out there?
Right. True. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. I don't know. Crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys for joining us on our Random Thoughts Thursday. Um, we will see you guys next week.
Sounds good. See ya. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.